This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila. In this episode, orthodontist and author Emily Taing Watson shares the extraordinary story behind her book, Roots of Resilience. Emily reflects on her parents' journey from escaping Cambodia to building a new life in America, where their tireless work ethic and deep faith shaped everything she's become. From growing up in a family donut shop to leading her own thriving practice, Emily opens up about the lessons of courage, gratitude, and perseverance passed down through generations, and how showing up every day, even in fear, builds a foundation for lasting success. Emily, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
You're very welcome. And I love commiserating about refugees. So Emily, my mom was a Cuban refugee who came over from the freedom flights in 1967. So she escaped communism. Your family escaped communism from Cambodia. So I still to this day, like 50 years later, still love talking to my mom about it because there's something almost like, I don't want to say Hollywood about it, but almost like unreal of what our family had to go through. And every time I see her, I live away from her now, but every time I see her, I always like to bring it up because she'll always talk about a story that she never shared with me. And so the last time I was talking to her, she told me that when Castro came in, if you were a Spanish national, you can leave and go back to Spain without any repercussions, but you couldn't take anything with you. So my mother was born in Cuba, so she couldn't go that route, but her cousins and aunts and uncles were from Spain, so they were going to go that way. My uncle was such a smart SOB. He built a false bottom in his suitcase, and he put the entire family's jewelry in this false bottom suitcase, because if my mom wasn't going to be able to take it to the States with her and no one could take it out of the country. So the only way to take any family heirlooms, pictures, anything like that was through nefarious ways. So my uncle built this. I guess he was like a carpenter or something. And this was like in the 60s. So they didn't have like advanced x-rays or search.
Yeah.
Was able to smuggle all of the family's heirlooms, photos, and mementos to Spain. And to this day, they still exist because he had the wherewithal to do this. So do you, and obviously you write about it in the book, but do you share that same passion as mine to, like, even though they were trying times, but incredibly inspirational, you can't stop talking about it?
Yes, the whole story of them escaping Cambodia, just everything about the story, it is totally just unreal. And the older that I get, the more I realize, one part of the book I talk about my dad saying it's a miracle that we're here. And that line just sticks with me because it could have gone so many different ways that it's just something so wild to think about. They were able to survive that and come here and, thrive in the States. So, yeah.
What detail from that escape stands out to you? Because the one my mother says is, so when she came over in the freedom flights, they had arranged for them to leave the country, but because Castro was such a demented person, he made them stay at a Castro sympathizer's house with guns pointed to their head before they left. For no other reason. They were leaving anyway, but because that's the way an evil Castro was, he was like, oh, before you go, we're going to plant this. We're going to give you a little trauma before you go. Were there any kind of small details like that your parents shared that still stick with you about that escape out of there?
Yeah, so my parents had an arranged marriage, so they were not married for very long. And when Vietnam invaded Cambodia, that was their opportunity to escape. And so my dad said to my mother, because they were recently newlyweds, and he said, you can stay here with your mom, or you can come with me and I can come back and try to find you. My mom obviously decided to leave with my dad. And they had a guide that led them through a minefield to get to the Cambodian Thailand border to the refugee camp. And from there, surprisingly, there was a church that sponsored my family. And I found out through interviewing the people that had helped my parents at that time that we were actually not the family that was supposed to come originally. They had originally sponsored a family that didn't end up making it to Indiana. I don't know why. And so then my family was next. And so again, just an incredible, story of how so grateful that we're here. And it's just such a miracle.
Do you ever talk to your mom? And because I know as you grew up as a woman, you probably had like guy issues or relationship issues. And there's always like, it's too early to do this in a relationship. Oh, there's steps. But here you're talking about an arranged marriage where your parents barely knew each other. And
Yes.
your mom could have easily said, hey, listen, I don't know you from Adam. I'll just stay here. And I don't think anyone out in your family would probably, look twice at her for doing something like that. Did you ever go to your mom and be like, Mom, were you like absolutely nuts? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I think that, part of my story, my mom talks about how she had said a prayer. She was Buddhist, but said a prayer that whatever God saved her from that life, that's who she would follow. And so I think that she thought, well, this is my way out and I'm married now. And, obviously Asian cultures are much different. And so she probably just was like, "Well, I'm married, so this is what I'm gonna do." But yeah, my parents were only 20 and 25 when they came to the US. So to think of, when you think about a 20-year-old girl or myself as a 20-year-old, I just would not have had that maturity, right? So yeah, it is and she didn't see her mom after that for 11 years. And that story is a miracle in, how they found her and everything. So
Wow, that's good. Well, I don't want to give too much away of the book, too much spoilers, but you do write about, and you open the book talking about your parents never missed a day of work, not even for Christmas. And
Mhm.
as an immigrant's kid, it's like even though I often joke I take a blue collar attitude to a white collar world, and I think that's one of the things that people don't understand about immigrants, even though they think, oh, they're all blue collar, they all have this mentality, but there's something more than blue collar. It's almost like it's in their DNA of like work, work, work. And then and obviously for many immigrants, it's like you don't even think about entrepreneurship. And then there's some that do, but it's because it's like, you have this attitude, you work for the man, you get your check every 2 weeks, you work hard, if you work
Mhm.
hard enough, you get a raise. Tell me about their work ethic and how they were able to pass that off to you without it being verbalized. Because my parents never said, go home and work hard, or go, put in your 9 to 5. Like they never said that, but it somehow stuck to me through osmosis.
Yes. Yeah, so my family, in Cambodia, my grandpa was a businessman, and so, he did a lot of trading across the border with Thailand, and so my dad was not he was familiar with running a business, and that was always his dream when he came to the States. And so my grandpa, I think at the time, if you've seen the documentary The Donut King, lots of Cambodian refugees own donut shops. And so during that time, my grandpa said to my dad, I think that you should. My dad tried to buy a McDonald's, but because he didn't speak English well, they would not give him the loan for that. And so my grandpa suggested the donut shop idea and my dad did it. And my mom talks about how she was terrified to answer the phone because they didn't speak English well at the time. And they just had that, my dad, to go from a country where everything is taken from you to coming here and having the opportunity to work and make a living. I think my dad was always very grateful for that. And I say that, customers would come in and they'd say, how are you doing today, T? And my dad would say, lucky to be alive, sir, lucky to be alive. And I didn't think about that until I got older, but literally my dad was saying, yes, I am lucky to be alive. I'm very happy. And he just told me, this is he works 365 days a year. And I always say, I can't, I don't know how he kept that motivation because now for us, it's like, oh, we get to go on vacation. We're looking forward to this break. He never had that. And I just find that just so admirable. And so, yes. And he told me many times, both of my parents did, this is not the life that we want for you. We don't want you to work 7 days a week. We don't want you anywhere near the donut shop. And they said, go to school for as long as you possibly can until you can't go anymore. And, we'll help you.
Wow. And look, I know it's random, but the donuts, is it a Cambodian delicacy? Tell why donuts?
I need to do more research into
Okay.
that because I don't know why and there are certain, I don't know. We'll have to look into that, Jim.
Okay. That's funny. So your family ended up in Indiana, right? And
Mhm.
so my family was fortunate to end up in the New Jersey metro area where there was a big Latino population. Not just Cuban, but like literally every Latin American country, Central American country represented there. And obviously, the language was not a barrier because you had so many people. What was it like for your family? And I hate to cast a broad brush to Indiana, but I think for most people, I've seen the TV shows and movies that take place. It's very white there. What
Yeah.
was it like for them assimilating to Indiana culture?
I think that my mom tells me, and at the time the US was not very, I would say, open or kind or receptive to Asian immigrants. And I think that the language barrier was a blessing for them because my mom said that although people, called them names or said things that they didn't understand, they were just grateful to be able to make a living, and they didn't really understand what they were saying anyways. So, they were able to just kind of brush it off. But yeah, so that was difficult. And growing up in school, I was the only Asian person in my class. And that was hard too. But overall, I think my mom had the opportunity. A lot of my family moved to California after coming here. And my mom did go out there, but it was too big of a city, too many things going on. And she's like, no, I'm going to stay in Indiana and raise my kids.
Wow, that's crazy. And you write about the fact that courage can only exist if there are fear and difficulties. How does that work with you? Because when you get to when your family starts and sets up roots in Indiana, the idea of fear and difficulties. I mean, obviously, everyone's gonna have difficulties, and you talk about the fact that you were like the only Asian kid, in your school. Um, how, how do you balance that? The fact that your parents came just preloaded with fear, and then you're
Mhm.
living in good old America, where your family's living the proverbial American dream. Did that
Yeah.
fear of what your family went through, did that seep into it? Because I know with a lot of cultures, it's like, don't talk about the past. I mean, was that part of it too? That they sort of silo you from that experience and trauma that they had? Or did they keep it? I know my mother loves the old guilt trip. I always joke that, Cuban mothers are very much like your old stereotypical Jewish mothers. They love to guilt you. Cambodian mothers, are they similar in that fashion?
I would say there were many lectures, which is probably how I was able to write this book. And the lectures, I think that my parents probably, I'm sure that they have not told me everything. The parts that they have told me are, horrific in itself. But I think like their fear of, just for example, going through, my mom's dad died of starvation. And so the fear of not having food to eat. And that would always come out in, when we were eating dinner. And even still today, my mom absolutely hates wasting food. And, she would make us, we would be sitting down at dinner with our rice, and every single last grain of rice would go somewhere, if we weren't going to eat it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think fear for just basic necessities, really. And I think that's part of also what drove them to work so hard. Cause my dad, I say in the book, but I asked my dad, when can we go on vacation? Because I wanted to go on vacation like everyone else. And my dad said, well, do you want food to eat and a house to live in and clothes to wear, or do you want to go somewhere for a week? And yeah, I mean, I wanted to go somewhere for a week, but
Yeah. That's so wild. And so who is because my mother was the most dramatic one in my family. Who is the without being offensive to your parent, who is the more of the drama queen of your family in terms of like bringing up some like your dad said, would you rather go on vacation or starve? Like
yeah.
who is more dramatic?
They both
Okay.
lectured me equally.
Okay.
Anytime I was in a car, it was a lecture about, you should be so grateful that you live in the States. You should be grateful that you have an education. Great. I mean, it was always that, and now I'm thankful for all of those many lectures, but then I'm like, oh my gosh, I have heard this so many times.
I'm sure that it made writing the book very easy because
Yeah,
all of this stuff is embedded in your
yeah,
brain. You can't shake it.
absolutely. That's
Uh,
right. It's in
that's
there.
funny. All right. So your parents, their goal and following that American dream of coming here and working their asses off so you didn't, worked
Mhm.
out. You become an orthodontist.
Yeah.
Tell us about that jump because, kid of a donut shop owner to orthodontist, there didn't seem like any natural
Yeah.
progression there. Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
So I remember one of the car rides with my dad.
One
And
of the luxury rides.
yeah, and he said to me, it was just the typical conversation, like, "Well, what do you wanna be when you grow up?" And, I loved arguing with my parents, and I, watched these shows on TV, and I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And my dad said, "Oh, there's too many lawyers in this world." He said, "You need to be a doctor, and you need to help people." And whatever, I guess that stuck with me because then after that, for most of my life, I wanted to be a pediatrician. I loved being around kids and just, connect with them naturally, I feel like. So my whole life, I was going to be a pediatrician. And then in college, I went on a missions trip to Ecuador, met a dentist, and he encouraged me to pursue dentistry. And I was also getting braces at the time, and I loved my orthodontist. And so then I talked to my parents about it, and my mom's like, I think that would be a really good field to go into, and you don't have to work such long hours. You can choose your schedule, etc. So that's how that happened. Yeah.
Wow. That's so cool. Out of curiosity, so I'm a card carrying Gen Xer, Emily. And I remember that I think I'm gonna go ahead, broad statement. Everyone in my generation had braces. Like everyone and their mother at one point had braces. Fast forward now to the wonderful 2020s. I don't see it that much. What
Really?
what changed in the world? Again, I'm probably not surrounded by high school kids, but I just don't see as many people wearing like your old school
Yeah.
metal dentist with the rubber bands and all that stuff. What
Yeah.
shifted there?
I obviously my practice is braces. So I see a lot of kids that have braces. And I also do a lot of early treatment where I expand kids really early so they're not so crowded later in life. And then there's aligners where, it could be that they're straightening their teeth. You just don't know and you can't see it. So yeah,
Okay.
I still see a lot of kids and adults in braces.
And I've noticed that I've honestly, that's one of the things I've noticed in the generation shifts of like when I was younger, you never saw adults wearing braces, but
Yeah.
now they do. Why now are they wearing it?
I've had several parents that say, okay, I've taken care of all of my kids and now it's my turn. And I've had, even just the effect of if you do have really crowded teeth and you can't take care of them properly, higher risk of cavities or losing teeth. And so they do have a motive to straighten their teeth.
Okay.
And I my oldest patient that I've had is like 77. So it's not too late. And she loved it.
How long did she have it on for? Because I know I'm trying to remember. I think it was like a yearish or something
Yeah,
when I was a
she
kid.
had them on for a year and a half, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, and she
What
was
was that conversation like at the old folks home? Her walking around in braces, like, "Hey, kiddo, what are you doing?"
she was rocking the braces, that's for sure. She was great.
That's awesome. That's so funny. And so you used a phrase because you're an orthodontist, crowding of the teeth. For the
Mhm.
non-orthodox
Yeah,
orthodontic crowd, what does that mean? The crowding of teeth?
just the overlapping when there's not enough space for the teeth to come in and, they're not straight, they're overlapping each other, harder to brush and floss around and collecting more food, plaque, etc.
Okay. All right, cool. And then you talk about the hardest part of orthodontics isn't the teeth, it's managing people. And I can imagine that since you are working with these patients, like we talked about, a year plus, most people, unless someone is having like a with sustained health issue, they're in and out with their doctor in a couple weeks. Oh, you got that thing, here's some pills, do this, do that, and I won't see you ever again. With an orthodontist, it's a long-term relationship.
Mm.
LTR here. Uh, How do you manage that? Because like you write in the book, just the people side of
Mhm.
orthodontic is tough. Tell me about that.
So when I say the people side, the orthodontics part and interacting with my patients, that part is very easy. It's actually staff management and getting together the team that's going to take care of our patients and families. That has been the most challenging and most difficult part. And that's what one of our faculty members told us when we were in residency was, the orthodontics is going to be easy. It's the managing of people and staff.
And no, I know, speaking to a lot of doctors, the relationship part, the soft skills part, ain't
Mhm.
got time for that in school. Like medical school,
Yeah.
it's not really a priority. So tell me about that journey for you when it came to honing that skill, because again, that's more kind of on the job training, is it not?
Yeah, I think that honestly, I think my parents' story has, I do something called Strengths Finder in my office, so
Sure.
it's a Gallup. So my strengths are harmony, consistency, futuristic, developer, and consistency. And I think that the softer skills of harmony and empathy, I think I got that just from my experience as a first generation American and my parents' story. So the empathy and, connecting with people, that has always come very naturally to me. And so I think it was a matter of trying to figure out how to use. I had a lot of coaching. My coach is a Gallup coach. Her name's
Wow.
Vicki Newell. And she is the one that helped coach me and help me figure out, okay, I have these strengths and I do have to lead this team. And how are we going to use my innate talents so that I can lead effectively, communicate effectively? And that really is what made the difference for me in, getting the team that I have today.
Tell me about that coaching piece, because I think a lot of people say we need more coaching. The adage. Even Tom Brady had a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. What was why did you think you needed something? Because you said you had the traits. So what
Right.
what were you hoping the coach would help you with those traits?
Yeah. So when I was in residency, I you can imagine going to school for 11 years and then an additional,
It's a long time. It's a long
uh, but I remember in residency, I had a situation where there was a dental assistant that came to help me. And I, of course, the doctor, I was just trying to do what I needed to do to get the patient. I was still learning myself and I was just kind of on this schedule. And I remember being really short with her. And my faculty member had said to me, "Hey, up until that point, I've only had to worry about myself, right? Like I'm in charge of myself and my grades and everything." And he just said to me, "Hey, you're going to graduate here in 6 months and you're going to have a whole team of assistants that you have to lead and figure out how to communicate with." And I thought about that and I'm like, "Oh crap, what am I going to do?" So I started reading or listening to these Audible books while I got ready, like Strengths Finder and, Start with Why, Simon Sinek, and all of these books. And I went to a conference and Vicky was giving a presentation called Building a Strengths-Based Team.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, this is a sign. So I went up and talked to her and I've been working with her ever since. But
Wow.
the soft skills of harmony and empathy, you have to know how to I was not using them effectively. So just one example, harmony, you like to find consensus, but the basement of it is that you don't like conflict. So I would avoid all situations that, that made me uncomfortable. But then, through coaching, Vicky's like, well, it's not that, you can't avoid the conflict, but you have to figure out how to use your harmony to get people in agreement. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. So, yeah, everyone needs a coach for sure. You can't do it on your own.
And one of the struggles I often talk with doctors and people as physicians with healthcare is the front of house matching the back of the house.
Mhm.
And that means for people that don't know what I'm talking about, like the actual physician relationship with the person is one thing, but the relationship the person and patient has with the front desk and the people that handle the scheduling is completely different sometimes. And for a lot, I'm sympathized for doctors. Again, they got no time for that. Like they don't have time to walk up to the front desk and go, "Hey, how are things going up here? Everyone's happy up here."
Yeah.
And so there is a disconnect, and this happens with even the best physician leaders, that because they just don't have the ability to keep an eye on that, that there is a fracture in that. And you'll see sometimes like feedback from like, "Yeah, the doctor's great, but the people at the front desk treated me like crap." Like this is stuff that happens a lot.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do you navigate that?
So this is my 11th year in practice, and it has taken all of 8 to 10 years
Wow.
truly to, I had a rep from a company say, "You are so lucky that you have the team that you have." And I said, "This was not luck.
No, 10 years of luck.
This was a lot of planning, a lot of challenges and tough times that we had to go through, to get the right people in the office. And, I think even though, as a doctor, you are very busy, you do have to still find time to nurture the relationship and show your team that you care about them. Because at the end of the day, they we have goals that we set together, but I do try, and even though I'm busy, say at the end of the day, "Hey, how are you guys doing up here? How'd the day go?" And so my team knows, like, while they respect my time, but they do also know if they really need to discuss something with me, they can.
And so you joke that it took you 10 years to find the quote unquote best team possible.
Yes.
You're obviously bright. You're coached. Self-reflective. Why do you think it took you so long?
Oh, let's see. Well, I think that, at the beginning of my career, I was the new young doctor, and I was dealing with, the previous doctor's employees. So in their eyes, I really didn't know what I was doing. And then on top of that, I have 2 kids, and I revamped 2 offices, and, I felt like I was putting out fires for 10 years. But I think part of it was holding on to, I guess, when there are people that aren't the best fit for your office, but I think the fear of change and fear of letting go, I think that makes you hold on to people maybe longer than you should. And so I think that was part of it. And also just, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes it just takes time and, time and faith and belief that, okay, I just have to be patient with this, and, it'll happen when it's supposed to.
Yeah, it's funny. This is a epidemic in like literally every industry. We are so busy surviving that we're not thriving. And so for 10 years you were surviving. You were like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm doing the best possible care for my patients." So that's cool. I
Yeah.
don't know I don't know what's happening in the front. The
Yeah.
the the people could be gossiping behind my back, but listen, I'm getting the patients. I'm everyone on the team's getting paid on time. I'm making a healthy living. So it is one of those things where either you do something about it or you don't, because you could have easily just for the next 20, 30 years just done the same thing. Just like, "Hey, I'll make sure I got the care right. And then the rest is, the rest it is what it is." But you had the wherewithal to finally, break that cycle of almost a decade. So I think that's really hard. And I think it's kudos to anyone who's able to do that, especially later on in their career, because people always say it's a lot easier to make rash decisions when you're young, but when you're older, there's a lot more
Yeah.
involved, children and families and the size of the business. So that I'm sure looking back at you're like, whew, I know I waited long enough, but man, I'm glad I did.
Well, I think also it's the credibility that you have to build with your team.
True.
So, it took time. Like, we have a very strict no gossip, drama or negativity like my team knows that I've had to, and we've gone through this where I've had to let people go. And it was really traumatic. It was
Wow.
not a good experience. And I didn't want to do it. But for overall the culture of the office and what I needed, I had to make that decision. And so I think I think every day as the leader, you have to show up consistently and you have to set the tone for the culture. And then you show the team, based on your actions, what you want that to look like. And then they're either on board or they're not. So that's it. It does take time for sure to build that.
No, that's great. That's great. And so we're both first generation Americans, and you have now second generation Americans. And there is this argument to be said that we're getting softer as these generations start to get watered down and live in the very comfortable American way, as they could actually take vacation and be fed.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
How do you instill a lot of that like grit and resilience in your kids, especially knowing that you're not passing any kind of generational trauma down towards them? I mean, I'm
Right.
sure you bring up a couple of your mom and dad stories every once in a while, but like it's not inherently on the surface. It's sort of below the surface. Tell me how you able to keep the best parts of that immigrant mentality, the grit, the resilience, the
Yeah.
blue collar mentality down to your kids now.
Yeah, the funny thing is so many of those lectures that are ingrained in my head, I say the same thing to my kids now. And the whole thing about food, like my daughter said, if she ever says, "I'm starving," oh, okay, let's talk about that,
Well, I have a story for you about
Yeah.
starving.
And I think just my kids are very lucky, and they are very comfortable. And I do try to have conversations with them. We do get to go on vacation, but I let them know, not everybody can do that. And so I do talk a lot about, gratitude with them and empathy, situations in school, where we can, I feel like we are so blessed that we have the opportunity to help other people too. And so it's been cool to see my kids, come home. Like my daughter said, she noticed a girl that didn't have shoes that were clean, and she wanted to get a pair of shoes for her friend. So, yeah, I think still trying to instill in them the values, and not being, I always say I don't want my kids to be those entitled kids that feel like they have everything. Like they need to understand, the story and the history.
That's great. And Emily, I always wrap up these conversations taking folks behind the dedication of the book. And not a surprise, but you dedicate it to your parents. May this book honor your courage, hard work, love, and endless sacrifice you've shown throughout my life. What do your parents think about all this? The fact that, like, they worked their asses off, they survived a lot, and they've got a daughter who's now a great mom, has a thriving business, she's a doctor, and now a book. Like, they've got to feel like, yeah, gold star for us. We done good.
Yeah, I hope they do. Yes, I know my parents, just even when I was in school, I know that they always, were so proud of me and my sister and brother, for all of us graduated from college and, all just great. So I know my parents are so proud of us. And, yeah, they, I just love them so much. They're wonderful people.
Awesome. She's Dr. Emily Taing Watson. The book, Roots of Resilience, Lessons in Courage, Family, and the Power of Showing Up Every Day. Emily, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Emily and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.